There's more nuance to that, but at the end of
Okay. Nodes that will do things that you need, so you don't have to implement all of it on your own. Same thing under spatial, we'll see also cameras, also collision shapes, but these are in 3D instead of 2D, so it's important you're using the correct node for what you want to do. Because our text adventure game is going to be primarily text and user input, we're going to be doing a lot of work in this control node, which is UI nodes again. So if I expand this, we'll see a lot of user interface nodes, such as pop-ups, containers, rectangles, graphs, lists, labels, etc. Things that are meant to give options or user interface elements to the user. So this is where we're going to be spending a lot of our time. And to start our game, I'm going to create a control node. So I'm not going to select any of the subnodes. I'm just going to select this basic overarching control node and hit create. And this is going to be our game. And you'll see now all of a sudden we have a control node right here on our left. It's the only node in our scene or in our game. And then on the right, so this is where we're going to be spending a lot of our time. And to start our game, I'm going to create a control node. So I'm not going to select any of the subnodes. I'm just going to select this basic overarching control node and hit create. And this is going to be our game. And you'll see now all of a sudden we have a control node right here on our left. It's the only node in our scene or in our game. And then on the right here, you'll see there's actually properties that we can change and edit about our control node. Now that we actually have a node selected. So the first thing I'm going to do is double click on this control node. You could also right click and hit rename, but I'm going to double click it. And I'm going to call this game. This is going to be our game scene. So I'm just changing the name of our node. And this is going to be the root node for our game for now. And then I'm going to hit Command S or Control S. Or you can just come up to the scene button up here and hit Save Scene. Either work. I'm going to hit Command S and we're going to save this just as game. And you'll see all of a sudden I've got a game.tscn, which is a scene file in our file system here. So when you have multiple scenes, you can double click them down in your file system to open them up top. So we have our first Godot project and we have our first node added. Now we're ready to start adding some more nodes and kind of talk through how to use control nodes in Godot, and we will start and format our game. So I'm going to explain some things about how control nodes work as we start adding more to our game, and it's okay if you don't understand them all right now. It'll make more sense as we keep going. But control nodes are pretty smart about realizing the width, the dimensions, the width and height of our game. So if I select our control node and go to layout up here, I can tell it automatically how to layout. we want this control node, it's going to be our game. So we want it to be the full rectangle, to take up the full screen. You'll see this little light blue line here. This is your camera or your window size. And so if I hit full rectangle while our control node is selected, our game node, you'll see that all of a sudden our game has expanded to fit our entire window. So that means that we have told our game, hey, fit the entire screen, and then if the screen expands, expand as well to match it. So if I hit Command S to save, now we'll have a game. So this is good, except there's just nothing really going on. So we're going to add a few other control nodes now to start formatting our game. And the thing we're going to do in this first episode, we're not going to build really any functionality, but we're going to build out our window. window so it looks like a text adventure game, and we've got the pieces we need to start implementing functionality later on. So let's talk about some of the control nodes that we can use in Godot. If I hit this plus button, this is how I bring up the window to add new nodes. So once I do this, I can add any of Godot's built-in nodes here. And the node that I want to add now is a panel container. So containers in Godot are basically control nodes that format all of their children automatically. You can manually control nodes. So if I go up here and hit the move mode and then move our control around, you can see I have control over moving it. I'm going to undo that. When you have a container node, you cannot move its children manually. The container node automatically determines the size and position of its children. So what we want is a container node that's going to contain all of our game elements and will help automatically determine how those elements are laid out. So we're going to start with a panel container. So I'll hit container and come down into panel container. Another thing you can do, though, because it's confusing and difficult to remember where everything is you can just type up here. So if I start typing panel container, we'll see right here. And it's important, don't use a panel, we want a panel container. So if I do a panel container, I can also come over to our layout and hit full rectangle for this one, and we'll see we now have this panel that extends for the entire width of our game. This is good, but it kind of looks a little weird right now. We'll change it in a bit. The reason we're using a panel container is because panel containers come with this background, and you can edit their panel style to make them look differently. So we want to do some coloring and formatting of what our game looks like. That's why we're using a panel container as our root. Now, the next thing we want to do is make sure our children aren't touching the edges of our screen. That kind of looks bad and it doesn't sit well with different monitors. You always want to leave some safe space at the edge of your screen. So what we're going to do is add as a child of our panel container a margin container. So what a margin container does is it lets you set margins on each side that children will be confined to. So you see our margin container is slightly less big than our panel container. And we below, as a child of our margin container, we'll change the margins in a second, we're going to add a VBox container. So what a VBox, there's two types of box containers. You'll see there's an HBox and a VBox. A HBox container will let you stack items horizontally, so it'll create columns, and you can specify the width of each column. You can do some customization within there, but it's a simple way to format items in column formation. However, we want to stack things vertically in rows, so we're going to use a VBox container. And if this is confusing, again, I promise as we keep working with these, they will be a lot more familiar. So I'm going to add a VBox container here. Now, we haven't renamed our panel container or our margin container, and I think that's fine, but when I'm using VBox containers and HBox containers, it can get a little confusing, so I like to rename them. And so I'm going to rename our VBox container as rows, because I think it just makes it a little bit easier for me to remember, hey, this is the overarching container that is determining the rows, how our elements in our game are vertically set up, how they're laid out. So we've got this rows container now. And if I select our rows container and our margin container, you see this orange box, their dimensions are the same. But what happens if we take our margin container and change these margins to be 20 on each side? Now if I select our rows element, our rows node, you'll see that it's much smaller because there's a margin of 20 pixels being applied to each side. So if I make this 40 on each side, then it'd be even smaller. We'll stick with 20. And again, I'm finding this under custom constants. Each container or UI element will often have a custom constant section where it has items that are unique to that specific control node. So our margin container has custom constants that let us determine the margins of each side. So let's go through and set these to be 20 again. Margin right, top, left, and bottom. Okay, so if I select our rows now, we see we've got a pretty good margin on the side of the screen, which is nice because now our UI elements aren't just going to butt up right to the side of the screen. This is perfect. This is exactly what we want. But let's talk about our layout for our container here. We want to have a big section up here that's going to take up most of the screen, and this is going to be where all the interesting stuff is happening. It's going to show the player what they've previously inputted, what they've typed in, and it's also going to display any responses from the game. So we're going to need one big panel up here that is going to contain the information from the game, and then We're also going to want a panel down at the bottom where the player actually types their input. So we're going to add both of those now. And they're going to be children of our rows because, again, we are using our rows VBox container here to lay these out vertically automatically for us. We don't have to code any of the layout. Godot is going to do it for us. So as a child of our rows, I'm going to come up here and hit the plus button. Additionally, besides hitting the plus button, man, whew, you can hit Command A to bring that box up. Control A on Windows. So you can either hit the plus button to add a child or hit Command A. I really like using hotkeys. It's a little bit faster once you get used to them, so I'll try and give hotkeys as we go along for each operation I'm doing. So the child we're going to add of our rows is going to be another panel container because we want our history area or our game area to be slightly different colored so it's easy for the user to make out. Now the problem is that we've got two panels here, but they look kind of the same. We kind of want to differentiate from them. So what we're going to do is use Godot's built-in styling functionality of panels to change the color of what our game looks like. So let's start with our background, and I'll actually rename this to be background, our top panel container. So if I select this and come into custom styles, you'll see that there's a panel element right here. So we can modify this panel property to apply our own custom style to our background here, which is what we want to do. So I'm going to select this empty button and just click it. And there's a couple options for different built-in styles you can do. You can add a style box texture if we had a background, an image that we wanted to apply, but we don't for now. We just want to do a flat color. So we'll hit style box flat, and we're going to create a new style box flat here. And you'll see automatically we've got this gray background. Let's make it something that looks a little bit, that stands out a little bit less. And if I come to background color here, this little property in the preview, I can adjust the background color, and let's make it a dark gray, not black, but a darker gray. So right about, not quite black, but pretty dark. I think that's good. So now we can see a little bit more of a difference between our panel up here, our game info panel, and our background. And we're actually going to do the same thing for our game info panel. So I'm going to call this and say, let's call it game info. And here we're going to come into our custom styles as well, hit new style box flat, and on this one we're going to make it slightly lighter. Not super light, but a little bit lighter. We can't really see it now, so what I'm going to do, we'll adjust this in a second. There's a lot of different properties here on controls that are going to be important for us, but right now the only one we need to know that we'll talk about is size flags. So our rows container takes up all of this space here, but our game info only takes up this much space. And that's because by default, these controls only take up as much space as they need unless they're told otherwise. So one way we can change that and tell our game info panel here to take up as much space as it can is we can come into our size flags and we can hit expand on the vertical. So you'll see both horizontal and vertical are fill. What fill means is that you're telling this control, hey, take up as much space as you need, but we don't want it to just take up as much space as it needs. We want it to vertically take up as much space as it can. So we're going to hit expand. All of a sudden we see our game info panel expand to take up as much space as our rows container is going to give it. So now we've got this, and we see that this is a pretty good color. It stands out from the background, but also kind of is this just nice gray. So we've got our game info section. Now we're good to add our input area. So in order to add our input area, we're going to create another panel container. So I'm going to select our rows, and I'm going to hit Command A or hit the arrow up there, and I'm going to create another panel container. And this is going to be input area, we'll call it. And so you see we've got a new panel container down at the bottom here. And what we kind of want to do is make it take more space than this, because right now, remember, our game info is saying, hey, take up as much space as you can. We don't want our input area to take up as much space as we can. If we set the size flag of vertical to expand, it would take up half the screen because both of these game info and input areas would be competing to take up as much space as they can, so it would even out. But we don't want this. This is just an input area. It only needs a little bit of space. And so what we can do instead is give it a minimum size. So if I come into rect here, this is the rectangle properties. You can set the properties for this node. Now remember, we said that containers determine the position and size of your rectangle. So if you change these, you'll be a little disappointed because they will get overridden by its parent if it is a child of a container node. So we can change these. I could change its size to be 2000 and it looks like it changed, but as soon as I toggle it on and off, all of a sudden it gets set back because our container is really determining its size. But what we can do that our container won't affect is set a minimum size. And so we could give this a minimum size of, say, 40. And what we're doing is we're saying, hey, this has to take up at least 40 pixels of its height. It has to be at least 40 pixels tall. We could also do that for the X, but we don't actually care right now. The size that our container is giving it is perfectly fine. So let's actually make this a little bit bigger. Let's do 60. And I think that looks pretty good. And all of a sudden we have a minimum size of 60 here. And even if we try and reset our size here, it's always going to keep that minimum size. Even if we hide it and then show it again, it's going to keep that minimum size. So when you have a control that's a child of a container, you can't really do much with the position and size, but you can change the minimum size, which is a nice way to give elements a certain minimum height or width. So now that we have a minimum size and we've got an input area that looks good, let's go into our custom styles here. We'll make a new style box flat like we have, select this, and we want this one to be gray too, but just slightly lighter than the other grays, I think. I think that's pretty good. So you can adjust this as needed, and if you want to do an aesthetic that isn't gray, you want to make purple and blue and green, go ahead, make this your own game for sure. I'm just going to keep it at a gray, kind of like this, just to give it a simple old school aesthetic. So we've got our input area set up, we've got our game and our container looking good. One problem is that it'd look a little bit better if there was some more space in between our input area and our game info area. So in order to do that, we can come to our rows node here, and as the custom constant of a VBox or HBox container, there's a separation property you can set. And this determines how much space there should be between each row. It defaults to a very low number. I think it defaults to like 5 or something. And if I check it and put it at 0, you'll see they just butt up against each other. But we want a little bit more than that. So if we set it to 20, that kind of gives a little bit more definition. And I like doing 20 because remember, 20 is what we set as the margins on the side, so it looks consistent. There's the same amount of space on our side margins as there is between elements. And this is the really cool thing about Godot's layout system. Because we set the separation to 20, you might expect that one of these elements is going to get smaller or get pushed off the screen. But remember, we're telling our game info panel here to take up as much space as it can, to vertically expand. And so when our rows, when we increase our separation, what it does is it decreases the available room for our game info panel to take up. So it just makes it push up our whole and work of coding our layout a little bit and take up less space because there's less available space for it to take up. But it means that Godot is handling laying out our components in a really nice, pleasing way. We don't have to do any of the hard work of coding our layout for us, and we're letting Godot's layout system take care of it. So when you use containers in Godot, you lose a little bit of flexibility because you are letting them determine the size and the position of your child nodes, of your control nodes. But the nice thing that comes out of it is you get a really powerful and flexible layout system that's going to handle it for you. So in this video, we haven't set up any of our functionality, but we have a game area that looks great. It kind of has the aesthetic we want, and we've gone over everything we need to know about how to start a project in Godot and get our text adventure game going. So this is going to be it for the first video. In the next one, we'll actually start implementing some functionality. I hope that this video has been helpful for you. If it has, a like and subscribe to support the channel are always appreciated. We'd love to have you in our Discord server. You can ask any questions you have there. The link to that to join is in the description. And if you find my work helpful, don't. In this video, we're going to take what we started in the first video and we're going to add a text input field to our game so that the user can start typing things and enter commands. We'll show you how to make this text input field, how to add this nice little caret to the beginning to indicate to a user that this is where you type, and we'll also show you how to import fonts into Godot so you can get nice fonts like this one that we have here to kind of give your game a certain aesthetic. Let's get started. So this is where we left off in the first video. We had our game scene, which had a background, it had a margin container, and then we had an area for our game info where we're going to get information back from the game and where our player was going to input their own text commands. Now, there's no functionality here right now. You can't do anything. And so the first thing we need to do is give the player a way to enter input. And that's what we're going to do right now. So fortunately, Godot has built-in nodes to help us do that. So I'm going to hit Command A or hit this plus button, whichever one works for you, to add a new node. And I'm going to look for line edit. And you'll see that line edit is a node that is a child of control. So it's another control node or a child of control node. It's a type of control node. And this line edit, it tells you right here what it does. It provides single line string editing, which is exactly what we want. We're making a text adventure game. We don't need multi-line editing. We just need a simple way for the user to enter some input. So I'm going to add this line edit here, and you'll see all of a sudden it's recolored our panel. And so what we can do, now that I have this line edit, I'm going to call this input because this is what the user is going to input with. You'll see there's a bunch of properties on the right side here. We're going to deal with a fair amount of these over time, but for now what we want to do is come down to custom styles, and for normal we're going to hit new style box empty. And you'll see now that it is the same, our panel is the same color as our input area. And the reason for that is that when we say style box empty, it basically just removes all styling from our input area. And so it just kind of becomes this empty container. And so we're seeing the panel that exists underneath it. So if I save our game, now we can actually run our game. So I'm going to hit Command B, or you can hit this play button up here. And if I do that, we'll see that we need to select a main scene. So when you run your game or hit Command B, Godot needs a main scene so it knows which one to run. Because your game can be made up of many collections of nodes, many different scenes. You need to tell Godot which scene you actually want to run, which one is the main scene of your game. And so this, of course, is going to be our game node or our game scene. So I'm going to hit select, and I'm going to select our game scene. And now we have a main scene and Godot's going to run it. And here we go. I've got this big window that's popped up and it's our game. We've got our border here, we've got our info area, and we've got our input field. You'll notice that it's not focused by default. If I start typing, nothing happens. But if I click on it, now I can start typing. So I can say, hi, how are you doing? And we've got input all of a sudden. There's just a couple problems. One is that it's super small. And the other is that it's just kind of not, it doesn't really look right. It's butting up right against the edge. So there's a couple things we need to change. We need to get a bigger and better font. We need to style it a little bit differently. And it would be really nice if it was focused by default so the user could just type and didn't have to come down and click this. And we're going to fix all of those things right now. So if I close our game, I can just hit Command Q or quit. One thing that is it will be helpful for me to show you is how you can affect when you run your game where Godot puts your running window. So you can actually adjust where Godot creates a window for your game to run. You saw there that it was full screen for me. I've had that from a previous setting. But if you come up to editor here and then hit editor settings, and then if you come down and scroll down through all this to run and find window placement. By the way, this menu here that you're seeing lets you change all of these settings for the editor. You can change text editor stuff, you can change interface, you can change so many different things. While we're here, one change that I recommend everyone doing is finding the text editor in the completion section here and enabling add type hints. It's off by default, but I recommend enabling it for everyone. What this does is it adds static type hints to all of your built-in functions that you autocomplete with. If you're looking for an explanation of why static types are important, I've got another video about how to use static types in Godot that's really helpful, I think, for beginners trying to learn GDScript. So I definitely recommend checking that video out if you have not. Anyway, so we've got our add type hints button selected here, but what we're really trying to come down here is run in window placement because we want to change how our window is placed. So by default, it is centered. And this tries to center it on a screen. For me, with a Mac and an external monitor, this is very problematic. It does not actually center it. So I usually either set a custom position where I bump it, like I kind of manually adjust these numbers, or I've just defaulted to doing force maximize so that it'll try and maximize it. But we can just do centered, and I can change this to be, well, let's see, if I try centered and then I run this, you'll see that it starts, oh, it actually is centered. So that's good. So that should be good enough for us now. And now I've got a little bit more manageable of a screen size, and it looks a little bit better. And when I type, our font doesn't look as small, but we still want it to be bigger. So anyway, just a quick overview of how you can adjust where your window pops up. Okay, so there are a couple things we want to do. First, let us add our first script to our game. So in Godot, any single node can have one script attached to it. You can't attach multiple scripts to a node. But and that's a little bit different than Unity per se, where you can have a game object that has multiple scripts or components attached. But it actually works under the hood. It's pretty much the same as Unity. So instead of having one object with a bunch of different scripts attached, you can have one node that has a bunch of child nodes with scripts attached. It's fundamentally the same thing. It's not less memory efficient. It's not less performant than it is in Unity. It's really doing the exact same thing. It's just you kind of have to refactor your thinking, where instead of one game object with a bunch of different properties like in Unity, you have a scene which has a parent node and then or a root node and then children nodes that can have additional scripts and do additional things. It's actually a little bit easier, and you can get better division of your code. You can have more modular, abstracted, oftentimes nicer to use code by doing it the way that Godot tries to make you do it. Which isn't to say Unity's way is bad. I love Unity, it's where I got started, but Godot has a really, really awesome and flexible node and scene system that it runs on. So what we can do is add a script to our input here. And in order to do that, you can either right click and hit attach script, but what we're gonna do is you can also just hit this button up here, which is the quicker way. So I'll just select this and hit attach script. You'll see a couple things pop up. The first is language, so you can write scripts in NativeScript or VisualScript. NativeScript is the C++ under the hood that Godot is written in. VisualScript is a visual scripting language, so there's a graph that you can work with. I recommend learning GDScript if you have not already, but again, definitely check out the official Godot tutorial, the Making Your First Game, if you haven't, to get familiar with GDScript. So we're going to stick with GDScript, and you don't need to adjust any of these. The only thing you might adjust is the path. It'll automatically create a script with the same name as the node that you're attaching it to, and that's fine for us now. So I will hit create, and now we've got a script. And so if I select in our scene tree any of our nodes, it'll bring us back out to the scene view, but I can also hit the script button to go into the script view. So you can go back and forth by using this. I generally don't do that. I usually just select around here, and if I want to go back to the script for this node, I'll just hit this little scroll button, and that'll take me to the script. So you can bump around by just clicking in the scene tree as well as up here. You'll find a workflow that works for you. So there's a couple things we want to do. The first thing we talked about is it would be really nice if we could just start typing when our game opened up instead of having to click here first. So if you're not familiar with that term, the word we're looking for is focus. One element can be focused on the screen at a time. And we want our text input to be automatically focused so we can just start typing. And Godot actually provides a way to do it. There's a function built into all control nodes called grab focus. And so what we can do is I'm going to get rid of a lot of this boilerplate. There's a lot of built-in Godot functions that you can learn. Ready is perhaps the most important of it. This function is called whenever a node enters the scene tree. So whenever a node is added to the scene tree and is visible in your game, this function is called right as that is happening. So this is generally where you're going to want to do a lot of the initialization for things. And so what we can do is, and certainly anything that shouldn't be done when the node is first created but needs to happen when the node is actually in the tree, you want to put here. You don't want to do things that involve adjusting or touching something in the scene tree until ready. You don't want to do it before then. There's some functions that let you access the before when a node is created but not yet ready. Anyway, so what we can do here is say grab focus. You'll see that it's going to autocomplete this one for me because it's a built-in function that on the control node, and because line edit is it inherits from control, we're going to get that autocomplete. So I just call grab focus, and now whenever our node is ready, our input node, and our game runs, it's going to grab focus. So if I hit Command B to run our game, you'll see we can just start typing right away because it's grabbing that focus instantly. So this is perfect. That's exactly what we need. It's a super easy way to get our focus. Additionally, I'll comment more on this as we go, but I'm going to try and show you or write code that adheres to the GDScript style guide. You can really style your code in GDScript however you want. Godot doesn't force you to do anything except for certain syntax things like ending lines or statements with colons and tabbing. But there is a GDScript style guide that GDQuest and Nathan Lovato and some of the guys doing really awesome work on Godot's documentation have put together just as a common way to try and have nicely formatted GDScript code. I'll link to that in the description, but we're going to try and adhere to that as closely as you can. And part of that is having 2 lines between functions. So if I had another function, unlike in some languages where you just had 1 line and say like func x, GDScript actually recommends having 2 lines because it is a tab and indentation based language, and so we will stick to that as best as we can, but I'll get rid of this for now. So the next thing we want to do is actually get a better font, and in order to do that we need to go outside of Godot because Godot only offers a single built-in font that you can't really adjust. And so what I'm going to do is actually go to Google Fonts. It's just fonts.google.com. I'll also link this below, and you can find it in the project folder or the project on GitHub if you just want to download it there. But I'm just going to find some monospaced font because I think it gives the vibe we're looking for with kind of a retro text adventure, and they're just every character is the same width, so it just looks a little bit better for games like this. So what I'm going to do is I found just a random one, IBM Plex Mono. This is actually the font I use for most of my programming when I'm a software developer. But I'm going to hit download family here, and what we're going to do is it's actually just going to give me a zip file that I can download, and I'll show you how to import that into Godot. So here in my Godot window I have opened up the zip file, and I know the font's kind of hard to see, but I can zoom in a bit, and you'll see there's just a bunch of different TTF, which is true type font files. These are the type of font files that Godot needs when you want to import a font. And we're going to be able to adjust the font size in Godot, but the font weight, whether it's bold, italic, or regular, etc., you're not really going to be able to do it. So we're going to drag 2 of these into our Godot file system. I'm going to grab the semi-bold, and I'm going to grab the regular. If you in your game think you want many different types, like you want italic fonts, go ahead and drag those in too. You can do whatever you want, but for my purposes in the tutorial, we're just going to have regular and semi-bold. So I'm going to select those 2, even if you can't see it very well, just trust that these are those. And all I'm going to do is just drag them out of this folder right into the Godot window. So if I click on them and drag, I can drag them right into the file system in Godot, and they're going to get imported just like that, and we're good to go. Now these are assets that are imported into Godot, but we can't actually use them yet. We have to create a font resource, and as a quick overview, resources are the fundamental they're a fundamental type of object in Godot. They are not nodes, so they're not visible in your scene, in your game, but they store data and tons of different stuff across all the nodes. Every node in Godot uses resources to some degree. So for example, earlier when we were setting our panel custom styles, this style box we created is a type of resource. A resource is a generic term, just like node is a generic parent class for all the different specific types of nodes, a resource Source is just a generic umbrella for all the different types of data containers and resources you can use in Godot. So a style box is a type of resource, and a font is a type of resource. So if I right click on the res folder down here, I'll see a new resource button. And what I'm going to do is search for fonts here. And I'm going to select the dynamic font. So dynamic fonts use the TrueType font asset types, that file type. And so I'm going to create one, and now I'm going to have this new font, and I'm going to call it Plex Mono, and we'll call it, let's do 16. That'll be a base font for us. Additionally, in Godot, it's recommended that you use Snakecase for your naming for all resources and for a lot of classes as well. I pretty much use it exclusively. Sometimes for scripts and scenes, I will save it with uppercase in Pascal case, because that's generally what Godot, the engine, defaults to. That might be the only way I go against the style guide, but we'll save all of our resources and other things in Snakecase like you see here. So Plex _ Mono _ 16. And now what I'm going to do is double click on our Plex Mono, and even though our Plex Mono resource isn't in our scene tree, if we double click it, the inspector tab over here on the right will open up to the Plex Mono 16 resource. So we can edit it over here even though it's not in our scene itself. We just have to double click it in the file system. So we want to open up this font tab, and here what we want to do is drag in the IBM Plex Mono regular as the font data. And now it's going to have that as our background font data. Because that's Gen 18. Our Plex Mono resource isn't in our scene tree. If we double click it, the inspect them. We set this to be Plex Mono 16. Again, the IBM Plex Mono regular as the font data. And now it's going to And now what I'm going to do is double click on our Plex Mono, and even though our Plex, let's do 16. That'll be a base font for us. Dynamic fonts use the TrueType font asset types, that file type. And so I'm going to create one, and now I'm going to have this new font, and I'm going to call it Plex Mono, and we'll call it, let's do 16. That'll be a base font for us. Additionally, in Godot, it's recommended that you use Snakecase for your naming for all resources and for a lot of classes as well. I pretty much use it exclusively. Now it's going to have custom fonts. Thing about Godot is that the editor is fully compatible with every other part of the editor, so we can just drag in this right into our node and it just works. It's really awesome. And so now if I come up to our text here and start typing, you'll see that we're using the IBM Plex Mono. So we're going to create another Plex Mono resource that's bigger, so it's a little easier to see. So I'm going to come over. over to our Plex Mono 16 font, and we're going to duplicate it. You can either right click and hit duplicate right here, or you can hit Command D or Control D. I'll just use 28. All of a sudden it'll get updated to be to our game. So if I come into our input area, I'm going to hit Command A to add something new, and I'm going to add a label. And a label is just your basic plain text. It just displays text on the string or on the screen. It's a string. You can edit it from code if you need, but it's very simple. And so I'm going to add an input or a label below our input. I'm going to call it caret. And so we can actually reorder things in the scene tree, and the order that children nodes are in of a parent will affect how they display. And so if I drag our caret to be above our input, it's going to display before our input when things are drawn. So it's going to be drawn underneath our input. And so what we want to do is we want to make sure that our caret is always to the left of our input, because if I do space, I'm going to add a space to kind of add a very cheap way to do margins here. So space, right caret, and then space, and let me drag in our 28 font here. So this is going to work. The problem is that if I run our game now, we're going to be able to type over our caret, which we don't want. We only want our input field to start basically right here. So in order to do that, what we can do with our caret is actually make, as a child of our input area, an HBox container. And what we can do here is make our caret and input children of that container. And so now you'll see that this HBox container is going to automatically handle laying them out horizontally in columns for us. So we'll have our caret, and then our input comes after it. Now again, we want our input to take up the entirety of the space available to it. Since we added this container, it's not doing that anymore, so we need to manually tell it to do that. So we can do size flags, horizontal, expand, and we'll see that our input field is now taking up the entire space. So that was a really quick and easy way to get the functionality we were looking for. We just add this container, and all the quick and easy, and we'll see that our input field is now taking up the entire space. So that was a really quick and easy way to get the functionality we were looking for. We just add this container, and all of a sudden it's taking care of the fact that we're trying to have a caret before our input field, and the two won't overlap anymore. So that's really nice. If I run our game, we shall see that all of a sudden we start here. We can't really go back or select the caret, but if I start typing, or if I go all the way back, it just starts and ends at the perfect spot. So this is really nice. One other thing we need to fix is the fact that if I just type a lot of characters, we're going to be able to input just an unlimited amount of stuff, which we don't really want. So if I select our input field here, and if I come up to the top, there is a max length property. And we'll set it to something like 48 for now and see how that feels. That's probably way longer than anything we'll need, but might as well give some space. So if I just start typing randomly, we should see after a while I can't type anymore. And the good news is that that 48 characters is before we get to the end of the line, which is exactly what we want. So you could bump it up a little bit so it pretty much lines up with the end of the line, but I think 48 is totally perfect for now. I mean, there's no way we're going to have a command that takes this much room to type, and if so, we can adjust it later on. So now we have an actual input field that the user can type input. We've got this nice little caret here kind of prompting the user to say, hey, this is where you type. And it's really nice too because it's focused by the beginning, so we can just start typing when our game opens up without having to click on it. One thing that would be nice to do is you might see this little blue focus box here. This comes by default on most OSs. It's just showing that this element is focused, but we don't really want that to show here, so we're going to get rid of it. I will make the note that for accessibility's sake, this is not always the best move to make. You should usually have easy ways to indicate to a user and to screen readers that a certain element is focused, but just for the purposes of this tutorial, we're going to get rid of that now. So in order to do that, I select our input again, come down to custom styles, and under this focus section here, I'm going to do style box empty, just like we did for normal. And what this is going to do is it's going to get rid of any additional styling when our element is in focus. So now, when I run our game, we'll see there's no blue box that appears around our input field. So everyone, there you have it. We've now added an input field to our game. We have this nice caret here that styles it, and the user is able to type input, and we have a limit to how much input they can type so that they can't just type way too much. Thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I hope this video has been helpful and you're finding this series enjoyable. If you are, a like and subscribe to support the channel is always appreciated. We'd love to have you in our Discord server. The link to that is in